after a young woman was found dead inside a water tank on the roof of a downtown LA hotel. The mystery surrounding her death has only grown.
In 2025, newly surfaced evidence has reopened one of the most unsettling mysteries of the last decade: the death of Elisa Lam. What was once thought to be a strange but closed case is now being questioned all over again. The eerie elevator footage, her sudden disappearance from the Cecil Hotel, and the shocking discovery in a rooftop water tank all return with darker meaning. Because this time, the answers may be even more disturbing than the questions. The elevator footage that changed everything about Elisa Lam. What began as a simple solo trip in early 2013 slowly unraveled into one of the most unsettling missing person cases the world had ever seen. Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old student from Canada, had traveled to the United States for what was supposed to be a brief personal journey along the West Coast. It was meant to be a break from studies, a chance to explore new places, and experience independence. But instead of a normal travel story, her journey ended in confusion, fear, and a mystery that would soon capture global attention for more than a decade. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Elisa stayed in contact with her family regularly during her trip, updating them almost every day. So when her calls suddenly stopped, it immediately raised concern. Her parents tried reaching her repeatedly, but there was no response. Within a short time, she was reported missing, and authorities in Los Angeles began tracing her last known location.
A disturbing development in the search for a young Vancouver woman in Los Angeles. Nearly 3 weeks after Elisa Lam went missing,
that search eventually led them to the Cecil Hotel. The building itself already carried a heavy reputation. Located in downtown Los Angeles, it had long been associated with strange stories and unsettling history. Investigators began a full search of the hotel, moving through rooms and floors, hoping for any sign of Elisa. But the early stages of the investigation turned up nothing. No clear evidence, no witnesses with useful information, just silence. Then everything changed when police released a short clip from the hotel's security cameras. The footage, taken inside one of the elevators, immediately spread across the internet. In the video, Elisa is seen behaving in a way that quickly drew attention. She steps into the elevator, presses multiple floor buttons rapidly, and then repeatedly leans out into the hallway as if checking whether someone is there. At times, she appears hesitant, moving in and out of the elevator without committing to a direction. She also makes unusual hand gestures in the air, almost as if she is responding to something unseen. To some viewers, it looked like panic. To others, it seemed like confusion or a possible psychological episode. But for many people watching online, the behavior felt deeply unsettling, as if something was happening just outside the camera's frame that no one could explain. Once the video was uploaded, it didn't just circulate, it exploded. Millions of people around the world watched it, replayed it, and dissected every second. Online forums, YouTube channels, and social media pages were flooded with theories. Some believed she was being followed. Others suggested she might have been experiencing hallucinations. A few even pushed more extreme explanations involving supernatural forces. But while the internet built theories, the real investigation continued on the ground. Weeks passed with no confirmed breakthrough. Then, the case took a sudden and tragic turn. A hotel maintenance worker had been sent to inspect the rooftop after guests complained about issues with the water supply, low pressure, discoloration, and an unusual taste. When he reached the roof and checked one of the large water tanks, he made a discovery that immediately changed the direction of the entire case. Inside the tank was Elisa's body. The discovery shocked investigators and the public alike. Even more disturbing were the details surrounding how she was found. Her clothes were also inside the tank, raising immediate questions about how she got there and what exactly happened in her final moments.
The investigation, police treating this as a crime scene at that hotel. That's right, and I think we're still a little unclear on. They have confirmed that the body found in the water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel.
Authorities later ruled her death as accidental drowning. Toxicology reports found no alcohol or illegal substances in her system. On paper, the conclusion seemed straightforward, but the circumstances told a more complicated story. The rooftop tanks were not easy to access, and the structure itself raised questions about how she could have entered without being seen. Even the hotel's layout and security measures left gaps that people could not easily explain away. As the official report was released, public reactions split instantly. Some accepted the findings as a tragic accident, possibly linked to mental health struggles. Others felt the explanation left too many unanswered questions behind. And, as more details emerged, the case only became more complicated, pulling investigators and the public deeper into Elisa Lam's final days inside the Cecil Hotel, where every answer seemed to create even more questions waiting to be uncovered. Before the Cecil Hotel, the quiet struggles of Elisa Lam. Elisa Lam's story didn't begin in that haunting elevator footage. It started years earlier in Vancouver, Canada, where she was born on April 13, 1991, to immigrant parents from Hong Kong. Her family lived a modest life running a small restaurant in Burnaby, British Columbia. From the outside, it looked like a stable, ordinary upbringing: school, family, and a path toward higher education. She attended University Hill Secondary School and later enrolled at the University of British Columbia, pursuing her undergraduate studies. But even during her academic journey, there were gaps in her attendance that would later raise questions. Elisa wasn't consistently present in classes after mid-2012, something confirmed by university representatives. Outside of school, she found comfort in writing. Elisa became active online, sharing personal thoughts, poetry, images, and reflections through her blog. It wasn't just casual posting. It was where she expressed emotions she sometimes struggled to say out loud. Over time, her writings began revealing deeper internal battles. Elisa had been diagnosed with depression and bipolar disorder, conditions that she was open about in her posts. She described moments of emotional instability, including what she referred to as a relapse, where she felt overwhelmed by pressure, comparison, and a sense of falling behind in life. These entries painted a picture of someone trying to hold herself together while quietly struggling inside. Her mental health history included hospitalizations linked to episodes of hallucinations and severe emotional distress. While her family tried to keep many of these details private, it was later understood that her condition wasn't always stable. Medication was part of her treatment, though reports suggested she did not always take it consistently. Despite these challenges, Elisa still tried to live a normal young adult life. In early 2013, she decided to travel alone along the west coast of the United States, possibly as a break or a chance to reset. She moved through cities by train, eventually arriving in Los Angeles. On January 26, 2013, she boarded an Amtrak train from San Diego with plans to continue north towards Santa Cruz. 2 days later, she checked into a place that would later become infamous in her story: the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles, located near the rough Skid Row district. The hotel itself already carried a heavy reputation. Built in 1924, it had seen decades of decline, reports of violence, and disturbing incidents that made it a place surrounded by unease. Even after being renamed Stay on Main, its past was never far behind. Elisa's stay there would quickly become unusual. Reports later described strange behavior, room changes, conflicts with roommates, and moments that suggested she was not fully settled. Yet, at the same time, she still maintained daily contact with her family, who had no clear reason to believe anything was seriously wrong. What no one knew at the time was that her stay at the Cecil Hotel was slowly becoming the starting point of something far more disturbing than a simple travel stop. And the events that followed would soon pull everyone into a mystery that still refuses to fully settle. And somewhere inside that hotel, something began to shift in a way no one could fully explain. What really happened in the Cecil Hotel elevator? By early 2013, what started as a missing person report quickly escalated into something the internet couldn't ignore. The case of Elisa Lam didn't just stay within police files, it exploded into global attention after one unsettling piece of footage was released. Security cameras from the Cecil Hotel's elevator showed Elisa acting in a way that immediately raised questions. She stepped inside, pressed multiple floor buttons, then paused, as if something outside the frame had caught her attention. She leaned out cautiously, then retreated. Moments later, she repeated the same behavior, stepping in and out, hesitating, gesturing with her hands in a way that looked almost like she was communicating with someone unseen. There was no one else visible in the elevator. That detail alone was enough to send the internet into overdrive. Millions of viewers watched the clip repeatedly, trying to decode her movements. Some believed she was frightened and trying to escape someone. Others thought she might have been experiencing a severe mental episode. A few even pushed far darker explanations involving paranormal theories or hidden forces within the hotel. But no matter the interpretation, the video created something rare, a mystery that everyone felt they could solve. As the footage spread across forums, YouTube breakdowns, and social media discussions, Elisa's disappearance stopped being just a missing person case. It became a global obsession. Every frame was analyzed. Every gesture was slowed down. Every possible explanation was debated. Then, weeks later, the story took a chilling turn. On February 19, 2013, a maintenance worker investigating complaints about water pressure and discoloration made a discovery on the hotel's rooftop. Inside one of the building's large water tanks, Elisa Lam's body was found. The details were disturbing. The tank was sealed and elevated, to access difficult. Yet, the lid had been found open. Her clothes were also discovered inside the same tank. The scene immediately deepened the confusion surrounding her final moments. Authorities later ruled her death as an accidental drowning. Toxicology reports showed no signs of illegal substances or alcohol in her system, only adding more complexity to an already unclear case. Even with an official conclusion, nothing about the situation felt fully resolved to the public. The elevator footage and the rooftop discovery didn't seem to connect in a way that satisfied growing suspicions. And as investigators tried to piece together how she moved from that elevator to the rooftop water tank, a far more complicated layer of the story began to surface, one that involved the hotel itself, its hidden spaces, and the unanswered questions no report could fully explain. The hotel with a dark history behind Elisa Lam's final days. To understand how things unraveled, you have to look beyond the elevator footage and the water tank. The environment Elisa Lam stepped into played a much bigger role than most people initially realized, and at the center of it all was the Cecil Hotel, a building with a history that already made people uneasy, long before 2013. Elisa was just 21 years old when she arrived in Los Angeles, continuing what was supposed to be a solo West Coast trip. After traveling by train from San Diego, she checked into the Cecil Hotel, located in downtown LA near Skid Row, one of the city's most troubled areas. At first glance, it was just another budget stay for travelers. But the deeper history of the building told a very different story. Built in 1924, the Cecil Hotel had already gone through decades of decline by the time Elisa arrived. It was once meant to be a grand destination hotel, but over time, it became associated with a long list of disturbing events, deaths, violent incidents, and a reputation that made it infamous among locals. Even after a rebrand to Stay on Main, the building's past never really disappeared. Inside, the structure was large and confusing, with hundreds of rooms, shared spaces, and hallways that didn't always feel secure or monitored. Many guests came and went quickly, some staying long-term under unstable conditions.
Nearly 3 weeks after Elisa Lam went missing, a body has been found in a water tank on the roof of her hotel.
It wasn't a typical tourist hotel. It was a place where different lives and stories constantly overlapped, often unnoticed. Elisa was initially placed in a shared room on the 5th floor. However, her roommates reportedly became uncomfortable with her behavior. Some accounts described unusual habits, such as locking herself in, leaving notes, or asking others to leave the room. Because of these issues, she was later moved to a private room, 506. Even after the room change, staff noted moments of concern. At one point, she was reportedly escorted out due to disruptive behavior, though she still continued with parts of her trip, including attending a live recording of a television show. To outsiders, her actions may have seemed inconsistent, but she still maintained regular communication with her family, who did not initially suspect anything alarming. This mix of independence and instability would later become a key focus in understanding her final days. But at the time, there were no clear signs that anything was leading toward tragedy. What makes the Cecil Hotel even more significant in this story is not just its reputation, but how easily someone could move through it unnoticed. With its large layout, multiple exits, and aging infrastructure, it created an environment where small details could easily be missed, and where movement within the building wasn't always fully tracked. By the time Elisa's presence in the hotel became part of a missing persons investigation, attention quickly shifted to what had happened inside those walls during her stay. Staff recollections, security gaps, and her increasingly unusual behavior began forming a pattern that investigators would later try to piece together. But even with all of that information, one critical question remained unanswered. How did her final movements inside the hotel lead her somewhere no guest was ever supposed to reach? And the answer to that begins with what happened in the final hours before she disappeared completely from sight. The final hours of Elisa Lam, inside the Cecil Hotel. In the hours leading up to her disappearance, Elisa Lam was still visible inside the Cecil Hotel, moving through spaces that would later become the focus of intense scrutiny. According to staff accounts, she was seen acting in ways that stood out, even in a building where unusual behavior wasn't entirely unheard of. One of the most widely reported moments came when Elisa was seen in the hotel lobby, where she allegedly shouted phrases that didn't seem to fit the environment. Among them was a strange remark: "I'm crazy, but so is LA." Whether it was meant as a joke, a reflection of her mental state, or something else entirely, it left an impression on those who witnessed it. Security footage and witness statements later confirmed that she also moved into areas of the hotel that were restricted to guests. Staff eventually had to intervene and escort her out of one of these off-limits sections. These moments added to growing concerns that something about her behavior was shifting in the days before she disappeared. Despite these incidents, there was still no formal emergency alert or intervention that would have stopped her from continuing her stay. She remained in the hotel and was expected to check out as part of her ongoing travel plans. But that checkout never happened. Sometime before she vanished, Elisa was last seen near the building's elevators. That moment would later become the final confirmed sighting of her inside the hotel. After her body was discovered weeks later, investigators began piecing together medical and behavioral evidence to understand what may have happened. Toxicology results showed that her prescribed medication for bipolar disorder was present in her system at very low levels. This suggested that she may not have been taking her treatment consistently in the days leading up to her death. When authorities examined her belongings, they reportedly found additional medication still unused, reinforcing the possibility of irregular usage. For investigators, This detail became an important piece in understanding her mental and emotional state during her stay. Family members also shared that Elisa had experienced episodes of paranoia and confusion in the past. There were times when she would become fearful, withdraw from others, or behave as if she was trying to hide. These accounts began to form a broader picture of someone who may have been struggling more intensely during her time in Los Angeles than anyone around her fully realized. One theory suggested that she may have been experiencing a mental health episode when she made her way toward the hotel's upper levels. Investigators later proposed that she could have accessed the roof through a fire escape or unsecured door, details that were later supported by some internal assessments of the building's structure. From there, the theory continues that she encountered the rooftop water tanks, large, elevated structures that were not meant to be accessed by guests. Once inside one of these tanks, the circumstances of her death became tragically irreversible. Officials ultimately concluded that her death was accidental drowning, with mental health factors likely contributing to her actions. Still, even with that explanation, many elements of her final hours remain difficult to fully reconcile, because the timeline leading from a hotel elevator to a sealed rooftop water tank still leaves behind gaps that no report has been able to completely close. And it is within those missing pieces that the story begins to feel even more unsettling, especially when questions of access, timing, and awareness start to overlap in ways that don't fully align with any simple explanation. Thanks for watching. If you found this case intriguing, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. Stay tuned for more deep dives into the world's most disturbing and unexplained true stories.